So a couple of days ago, a bunch of us got a text from Clay asking to give him a hand with making some videos to help the Historical Society with all of this virus and shelter in place and social distancing. You know, we all can't get out. We're all going a little bit stir crazy. I know for one, myself, I am getting cabin fever very bad. And so, of course, I said yes and jumped at the chance to get out of the house and do something. Now, Washington County has a rich, wonderful history dating all the way back to the 1700s. So I struggled for a couple of days trying to decide what exactly I wanted to talk about. And I started thinking, well, we're just a couple of weeks past Easter. It's spring sometimes. We're not exactly sure. I don't know that Mother Nature's sure yet. But it's the start of a new season. Okay, close enough to Easter. Let's go for an Easter story. Not exactly the Easter story that you're thinking of, probably. Definitely, I'm sure, not what you're expecting. So, I know Clay's at home and he likes sitting in his comfy easy chair and he was really enjoying that. And yeah, my couch is real comfy here too, but you know, I'm more of a hands-on kind of guy. I like to go out and visually see the stuff. So since we can't get out, we have to social distance. I'm going to take you folks on a virtual tour. So y'all are going to take a ride with me. So come on, let's go take a ride. Okay, so here we are, overlooking the site of Miller's Blockhouse. If you look beyond me, the cove over there in what is now Dutch Fork Lake, recently refilled by the Fish Commission, clear at the end of the cove, almost in the middle, is where Miller's Blockhouse is at. Now, everybody thinks they've got it so bad right now with this virus floating around. You have to wear masks, you have to ration eggs and bread and cheese and everything. You're staying at home, you're staying in quarantine. Let me take you back to March 31st, 1782. And instead of staying in quarantine, I'm going to explain to you what the meaning of forting up is. The farm down there, a couple hundred years ago, was built by Jacob Miller Sr. somewhere around 1780, a little bit prior to that, 1778, 1779. And being the edge of the frontier, the settlers constantly had to be on the lookout and on the guard for Indian attacks. So let me take you back to March 31st, 1782. I want you to remember this lady's name because she will become to be known as the heroine of Miller's Blockhouse. Her name is Ann Hupp. Now we're going to back up slightly to the night before Easter Sunday. She had a dream that her husband, John Hupp Sr., had been bitten by a copperhead snake. And she said in the dream that he sunk his fangs deeply into his arm, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get the snake off of him. So the next day, when they wake up, they come to find that a colt had gone missing. And Jacob Miller Sr. and John Hupp Sr. said that they were going to go out and search for the colt. Despite Ann's begging her husband John not to go because of the dream she had the night before, which she took as a foreboding premonition, he laughed it off and he went anyway. Scarcely were John and Jacob out of sight when the women and children remaining in the fort heard the war whoop of Shawnee Indians and heard rifles fire. Anne immediately knew that her husband was dead. A band of approximately 70 Shawnee Indians surrounded the cabin, the blockhouse. They sent a young man out to try to go to Rice's fort, which is about 3 miles down the road along the creek, which is where several of the men from the blockhouse had gone earlier that morning. The boy didn't get very far. He ran into all of the Indians and turned around and ran back. As he was leaping over a fence to get back to the blockhouse, a shot rang out and hit him in his arm. Keep in mind, this boy was 9, 10 years old. He'd just been shot. Did he stop? No. He kept running with everything he had. He ran like he never ran before. Made it through the fort. Anne was sitting there with the door open. He ran straight into her arms. Anne closed the door. The Indians were closing in on the cabin. Did Anne give up? Did they sit in there and cry? No. Now you'll understand why she became known as the heroine of Miller's Blockhouse. Anne grabbed a rifle, stuck it out one of the firing ports of the blockhouse, and fired a shot. The Indians, understandably, backed off a little bit. There was Anne, a few other women, and one older man by the name of Matthias Alt in the cabin, and one baby, Anne's son. There were a few extra rifles in the cabin, so the other women in the cabin kept the rifles loaded for Anne. She would run from porthole to porthole, shooting out of every wall in the cabin, giving the Shawnee the impression that there were more than just women in the cabin. The Shawnee thought this was going to be easy. We saw 3 of the men leave. They went to Rice's blockhouse in the morning. We killed 2 of the other ones. There's women and children left. This is going to be easy pickings. They didn't count on Anne being in there. So, as I said, Anne was running from porthole to porthole firing. This went on all day. We're talking from the first thing in the morning until later in the evening. Towards the height of battle, thankfully, the women looked out, and the 3 men that had gone to Rice's blockhouse in the morning heard the shooting and started out for Miller's blockhouse. They were there. They were just on the other side of the Indians' lines. So the women started yelling, hollering at them, giving them directions as to where to go. Shawnee can't speak English. They had no idea what was going on. They couldn't figure out what the women were yelling about. So the women are yelling directions, and the Shawnee are completely confused. And at one point, the Shawnee were just sitting there trying to figure out what the women were yelling about. The men broke through their lines, ran straight through. Anne opened the door again, and they ran into the blockhouse. Now we've got reinforcements inside. It's one thing to attack a cabin of women and children. Now we've got 3 grown men inside. And when I say grown men, keep in mind, these guys are still in their late teens, early 20s, but at that time, they were grown men. So now we've got extra people in the cabin. The battle still keeps going on. The Shawnee's still firing nonstop at the cabin. Now the 3 men that went in there, and still Anne, are firing out of every porthole. It starts to get dark. The firing starts ceasing, slowing down from the Shawnee. Eventually, when it got dark, the firing stopped altogether. The next morning, they went out to find their dead. They found the bodies of Jacob Miller Sr. and John Hupp Sr. not too far from the blockhouse, tomahawked, scalped, mutilated. If you look past me, you see the pine trees just on this side of the cove. Just on the other side of those pine trees, just on the inside edge, is the Miller Cemetery. In it are buried John Hupp Sr., Jacob Miller Sr., Ann Hupp, and there is one beautiful pink granite memorial that says John Hupp Jr., Ann's son, the baby that was in the blockhouse. And on the bottom of the stone, it says something to the effect of the last of his namesake has gone to rest. That quiet little valley down there is such a very fitting place for the baby of the siege on Miller's Blockhouse to take his eternal rest. So there you have it. That's the story of the siege of Miller's Blockhouse, March 31st, 1782, and the incredible story of Ann Hupp, the heroine of Miller's Blockhouse. Never forget our history, folks. May they all rest in peace, and God bless them.